Hi, I hope you're having a wonderful day. I wanted to make another weekly reading vlog because, I've just been in the mood to read and to talk about the books that I've read. Last week I finished two books that were both, one of them is definitely a favorite of mine, and the other one definitely left me thinking. I'm running a bit late for the gym, and so I'm just gonna eat this really quickly and change and head out. But first, I wanted to talk about the books that I've been reading. This is where I'm keeping them. My friend got this really cute tote bag for me, and I think I'm just gonna be using it for everything. And it's such a cute size. She also got me a really cute mug. And so I really like gifts like this. The two books that I'm reading, actually there's more than two, but the two books that I have right here. The first one is The God of Small Things. I'm about a chapter in, I'm 50 pages in, and so far I'm blown away. And I'm also blown away by the fact that this is a debut novel. So currently, I'm also writing a story. So I noticed that I've started to pick apart things in books that I typically wouldn't say I would have noticed as I was growing up. Things like sentence structure, how long a sentence is, how short it is, which words are being used, what metaphors are being implemented. The more that I fixate on certain things, the more impressed I am by certain authors. And I feel like this is definitely one of those writers, because I feel as though she writes in a very distinct writing style. And it's one where she knows what grammatical rules to break in order to really hit the reader where it hurts, and which ones to follow. To do that, to intentionally be able to manipulate grammatical laws and convey certain messages in that way is just so impressive. And I really hope that I'm able to reach a level of writing as good as this. With that being said, this story, it follows a family in India. When I picked it up, I did not know anything about it. And what I know right now after reading a chapter is that it centers around these twins, this boy and a girl, and a cousin. This cousin is half British, half Indian. And I believe that that will be significant to the story. This is Dubliners by James Joyce. I'm not sure I said the title right, but James Joyce is the author of Ulysses, which is a beast of a book. And that book is one of my dad's favorites. I'm not sure I would want to tackle Ulysses, but I figured that this would be a good introduction for me into his writing. And so I decided to start reading it. I read the first short story yesterday, The Sisters, and I was blown away. I really like the writing style, and I like when the author doesn't explain every single aspect of the story, and he kind of just leaves it up to the interpretation of the reader. And so I had a lot of fun just letting the story sit in my head and just reading about the opinions that other people had revolving the story and what they felt like it meant. Some people felt like it meant nothing, others found a lot of significance from the story, and I really like writing like that. Essentially, the short story revolves around people living in Ireland, and so in Dublin specifically. And so I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of it. I think I'll take it pretty slow. Because again, I feel like these stories are the type that you should just sit with and revisit and reread. So I'm now 3 stories in, and I have to be honest, I'm enjoying these stories a lot more than I thought I would. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but I was a little scared because I looked at some of the reviews. A lot of the criticism was how they felt like nothing was going on. And honestly, I really like stories like that. The ones where it's just showing you small bits of mundane life. And the writing here, it just evokes a certain sense of envy within me because how do people manage to construct such beautiful sentences? let's finish this. The next book that I'm reading, or more so listening to and reading, is The Poppy War. This is by R.F. Kuang. It's a fantasy novel, which is quite unlike me. I've been picking up fantasy this year, and I think part of the reason I don't like fantasy is sort of a point that I touched on earlier. I like stories where the author doesn't feel the need to explain everything. And I feel like a lot of fantasy books, by default, the author has to explain everything because it's such a different universe and world. They really don't want to leave any loose ends in order for the reader not to feel like the story is incomplete. But I think by doing so, it ends up over-explaining things or just picking apart every single aspect of the story, including the characters' emotions and motives, and that just takes away from the fun of a story for me personally. There are probably fantasy books that don't adhere to this rule of over-explaining or info dumping on the reader, but I feel like the majority of the fantasy stories that I've read just feel like they're almost too detailed. With that being said, I do want to explore that genre more. And so this is my attempt at doing so. I picked up The Poppy War, not knowing that much about it, but hearing a lot about it. And I'm not sure what I expected, but I'm still reading it. And I'm about 70% into the book, and I have gotten attached to some of the characters. And so I am enjoying it. It's not a favorite, and it's very different from the books that I typically read. But so far, I do like it. So the two books that I finished recently are Beware of Pity and The Djinn. I'll start off with the fiction book. This is the second work of Stefan Zweig's that I've read. I read The Post Office Girl, and I absolutely loved it. This one I definitely did not like as much, and I think a lot of it has to do with me just really not liking the main character. Essentially, the story follows the relationship between a military man and a partially paralyzed girl. She's about 17 or 18 and he's 25, I believe. Something good that came out of this book for me was that it got me thinking about love and who exactly is deserving of love, whether or not I truly believe that everyone deserves it. And if I don't, who are the people that don't deserve love? And so I do think those are very interesting questions. But beyond that, the main character of the story, I felt as though was very immature, and he was having revelations about people that he shouldn't have been having so late in life. It was almost like he was learning how to be an empathetic person for the first time at 25. And so I just had no sympathy for him or the situation that he found himself in, even though a lot of the book he was almost pitying himself. That just made me dislike him even more. He was also a very indecisive character, and he just sort of let things happen to him, which, to be honest, I do like stories in which the characters are indecisive or they don't really mind decisions being made for them. But my issue was, or what I found annoying, was that he would sort of let things happen to him and then later on blame the circumstances or the people that led him down the path that he was going under. And personally, the lack of accountability I just found to be very irritating and just not a pleasant trait. The nonfiction book that I finished was The Djinn. I am a very slow reader, and honestly, that's not something that I want to change. I don't see the benefit in going through books as quickly as possible. And I do think it's a problem if I go through a book too quickly, because either it didn't challenge me or I just didn't like it enough to want to savor it. This was a book that took me a long time to finish. I started it in November 2025 and I finished it like at the very end of March 2026. And so it's been a couple months. But this is probably now one of my favorite books ever. And it's a nonfiction book. So The Gene is basically about DNA. It's about heredity. And it's about the discoveries that led to our understanding of this science, as well as the historical implications that those discoveries have had. Because the concept of genes to this day is something that has an effect on every single person. And so I think this is a very important book, and I would implore everyone to pick it up. I do have a medical background, and so many of the science bits here were quite easy for me to understand. But I do think that someone without a medical background could pick up this book and still learn a lot from it. There wasn't that much jargon used, and when it was, the author did a good job of defining it in very simple terms. And I think the author did a really good job of going back and forth between the science and the historical events that were taking place. This book raised a lot of ethical questions that are important for people to think about, even if you're not a doctor or someone in healthcare, because the science regarding heredity has affected many people, and I think that number of people will just continue to increase the more that we learn to manipulate DNA. I like the author's style of writing and storytelling so much that now I am on a mission to obtain everything else that he's written. I actually started another book by him. The book that I really want to read is Emperor of All Maladies, Biography of Cancer. But I think that The Gene and then this book that I just started reading are good books to read before I get to that one, since these are sort of about the cell and about DNA, and then we'll talk about the pathology of cancer. But this book that I just started is The Song of the Cell. I think this is his most recent book. Essentially, this book is about cells, the building blocks of all living things. So this book is the story of the cell. It is a chronicle of the discovery that all organisms, including humans, are made of these elementary particles. Conversely, it is the story of what happens when cells become dysfunctional, tipping our bodies from cellular physiology into cellular pathology, the malfunctioning of cells precipitating the malfunction of the body. And finally, it is a story about how our deepening understanding of cellular physiology and pathology has sparked a revolution in biology and medicine, leading to the birth of transformational medicines and of human beings transformed by these medicines.